It's Welcome to the Resolution.
Hey Jay, how's it going? So today, shall we talk a little bit about Notice of Deficiency, you were thinking?
Yeah, Notice of Deficiency, it's a letter. We'll start giving the overview right now. If you were audited by the IRS, the Notice of Deficiency is the last letter you'll get before the debt that you incurred from your audit is assessed. And the letter gives you one last chance, at least according to the letter, to go to tax court in 90 days. The Notice of Deficiency also is a letter that is produced after you fail to file your tax return and the IRS produces a return for you. I would say the latter is more common than the former. Substitute for returns is a common way for the IRS to get the attention of people that haven't filed tax returns. And the Notice of Deficiency is the big, scary letter that you get with a large dollar amount that you're going to owe unless you go to tax court, etc. But that's the general outline of Notice of Deficiencies. They're applicable to audits, last letter in an audit, and they're also the last letter you'll see on a substitute for return case where the IRS has produced a return for you.
So it's where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant letter, but as we'll learn in this podcast, there's some interesting routes to solve.
Just so people are clear, it's not the first thing someone's going to see. This is going to be after seeing previous letters from the IRS of the time?
Let's explore this through talking about audits first. Then we'll talk about substitute for returns. When you're being audited, there's two kinds of audits, a live audit or a correspondence audit. In a live audit, you're asked to defend deductions and or income that you've received, and an auditor determines if you did your tax returns correctly. They send you what we call a 30-day letter, Form 4549, with what they determine to be changes to your return, giving you a final chance to provide some missing input. And once you do that, the next letter is the Notice of Deficiency, the 90-day letter to go to tax court. Now, with an audit, you can appeal it. You can go to officially the Office of Appeals or go to the supervisor within the audit if you feel that you're not getting a fair hearing with your auditor. Some people will go to tax court, which requires an attorney who is barred at the tax court or an enrolled agent or CPA that has passed the tax court exam. Most tax court cases don't go to trial. Your case goes to a special auditor within tax court. But if you get a Notice of Deficiency, you must file your request to go to tax court in 90 days, no later. They will kick it out if you're 1 day late. But really, tax court's the last method of last resort. We have access to resources for clients that want to go to tax court here at Washington Tax, but you want to go to appeals. You want to avoid tax court if you can. It is expensive to hire a tax attorney or enrolled agent or CPA that specializes in tax court. You want to see if you can win with the auditor, then see if you can win with appeals. An alternative to tax court is to do an audit reconsideration, which isn't limited by 90 days. It's not very easy to do on a live audit because auditors are pretty thorough. To do an audit reconsideration, you're going to have to provide new evidence and wait a long time for the IRS to approve. Now, I'm going to segue from a live audit Notice of Deficiency to a correspondence audit Notice of Deficiency. Correspondence audits, which Washington Tax does hundreds a year, is a CP 2000 letter where the IRS has identified changes through their computers on your tax return, stock options, property sales.
Something missing.
Yes. And same thing. Well, similar. They give you a chance to respond. If you don't respond in time, notice a deficiency. But correspondence audits have a completely different trajectory. If we get a notice of deficiency on a correspondence audit because of COVID and whatever, the IRS not being as efficient as they used to be, we're still going to respond to the correspondence audit. We're going to fax a defense to the original source. We're not going to bother with tax court.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And if the tax court date is missed, we're going to do an audit reconsideration. And we're going to do it through taxpayer advocate, showing the evidence. Audit reconsiderations are really for correspondence audits above any other because they're easier to do. So those are how notice of deficiency works in live and correspondence audits. Final piece of the correspondence audit. You don't get a 30-day letter. You either respond or you don't. You're going to get a notice of deficiency. You're going to owe the money unless you do an audit reconsideration later. So, or as I said, submit through the first office even though the tax court is on the notice of deficiency.
So we see it. We see CP2000s. We see notice of deficiencies. Just to state the obvious, I mean, you're going to want to address this when you get the CP2000. That's your sign that you don't want it to fall to the next step. But that's what our focus is today, as far as what happens if it goes to that next step.
Yeah, I mean, Washington Tax represents people in audits and CP2000 defense and substitute for return issues.
Mm-hmm.
CP2000 defense are like an art. We're really good at responding to them with an incredibly high success rate when we believe they can be won. Like I said, a correspondence audit's a little loosier-goosier than a live audit. Auditors are assigned to cases to do it rigorously, and if they fail, the audit, your avenues of relief are more limited. But you can still go to tax court, you can still do an audit reconsideration, you can still appeal, right? So,
okay.
I am going to segue to notice deficiencies on substitute for returns. If you've ignored the IRS, you've ignored letters, you've ignored them asking you to file your returns, they probably identified you as somebody who has income on 1099s, 1099Ks, that will incur tax. You're on their radar. If you ignore them, you're going to get a notice of deficiency saying you owe a lot more money than you would have if you filed a return to get your attention. Like a correspondence audit, you do have remedies. I mean, going to tax court on a notice of deficiency from a substitute for return that the IRS produced for you is kind of a waste of time. What we do at Washington Tax, without revealing all our trade secrets, is we're going to prepare that return, or we're going to take the return that the client has already prepared, mark it in a certain way, and we're going to fax it, not mail it, to the IRS substitute for return office, who we have a special connection to. We actually are getting substitute for returns reconsidered in about 60 days. Now, getting a substitute for return reconsidered while the notice of deficiency is in place isn't always smooth because that process needs to cycle out of the tax court dates. But ultimately, even if you lose your case in tax court, I would substitute reconsider the return, submit it, and that'll fix that. So really, notice of deficiencies, we're to look at them. They really are most important when it comes to live audits. But correspondence audit, substitute for returns, there's a lot of remedies that the IRS accepts, even when the tax court is missed.
What should a client who gets a notice of deficiency, they reach out to Washington Tax, what are we going to ask of them?
Good question. These cases, we're going to research their record, get all their transcripts, and start to exchange information to do their tax returns. We're also, maybe the client has already prepared a tax return for this year but has not submitted it. We'll get that. If we believe the client is still going to owe money, even after a SFR is reconsidered or after an audit, we're going to look at the client as a collections case, see if we can negotiate a settlement, an offer in compromise, a penalty waiver, a livable installment agreement. We're going to look at remedies that you find in the collections department.
Monthly expenses and things like that kind of come into play when you get to that point, just as you would with any kind of resolution.
Washington Tax normally doesn't do financial statements on the phone with clients as an intake procedure.
Yeah, I mean,
but we might kick around
as part
some
of the process.
general ideas on the phone call when you call us at 888-282-4697 or email us through the website watax.com. But we're just going to look at the broader contours of the case. But we will look at the case as potential collections case, too. If the remedy in collections and offer in compromise, we might treat the audit process a little more loosely. But if you aren't going to be an offer in compromise, you want to do the audit process, including the notice of deficiency stuff, really meticulously so you don't owe any more tax because you'll probably have to pay it if you owe it.
I think we've covered quite a bit. Are there any other thoughts you have as far as notice of deficiency goes? What kind of time frame do we want to go into that? What's the success rate of these kind of things?
Well, notice of deficiencies are 90-day letters. The clock's ticking when you get them. You really should either represent yourself or pay a licensed tax professional or consult with a licensed tax professional like Washington Tax to evaluate your case and see how to handle this. But notice of deficiency really means, if we're going to summarize it in a boilerplate way, is you will be assessed tax. It will be on your record. A tax lien might be forthcoming afterwards. You will owe the IRS if you don't deal with this. It's really a line in the sand. There's no more like hearsay. It's official. Or you will owe.
Yeah, no more kicking it down the road.
Yes. And so just so you know, a notice of deficiency isn't you owe now and you need to pay it. It's you will be assessed now. Do you have any other ideas how to fix this?
Yeah.
Later, it will officially be a bill. And also, one last thing. So one of our strategies here at WATAX is we'll do penalty waivers once the case is in collections, but sometimes we'll do a penalty waiver within the audit, particularly if our client's going to lose. And because auditors sometimes are sympathetic in a way that collections people are not. They're like, okay, you had a good history, and sorry, this audit sucks. You're going to owe a bunch of money, but I think I can listen to a penalty waiver story or how you might have had bad accounting advice. You basically could submit a penalty waiver through an auditor beforehand. Now, this topic pertains to live audits, so.
Okay. Cool. Well, thanks, Jay. WATAX.com is the website. Check out. There's further information on there. We have a blog site that has lots of information about notice of deficiency and many other tax topics. And of course, if you want to reach out to us, use the Contact Us page on that site, especially if you find yourself with a notice of deficiency in your mailbox when you get home today.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay.
Bye.